Blog Talk Radio.
This is the Donelson Files. Tom Donelson. Coco Konski will be out tonight. She's on a special assignment. And tomorrow night, I will be on a special assignment. And Coco, but don't worry, Coco will have Lauren Buys, the official European correspondent for the Donelson Files, and CeCe Harrison, who is the official Canadian correspondent. And they're going to be talking Ladies' Night. So if you want to just, so all of you ladies out there, nothing's taboo. Relationships issues will come to the forefront tomorrow, Ladies' Night, Wednesday. And next week, we're going to have two very interesting special programs. Wilford Riley is working on a special research project, which he's finishing up. And we're going to talk about that research project. He's going to talk about a wide variety of things, dealing with COVID, dealing with the lockdown, dealing with the economic side of the equation. And there'll be some very interesting data he'll be presenting to us. And then Wednesday, September the 2nd, Justin Hart of Rational Thought. He's a data man, collects data all the time, and he'll be giving you the latest numbers dealing with COVID. And both of these gentlemen will be challenging a lot of the conventional wisdom. So, and tonight I want to introduce Ian Murray. Mr. Murray is the Vice President for Strategy and Senior Fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, and he directs the Center for Economic Freedom. He's been the author of best-selling books, The Really Inconvenient Truth, Stealing You Blind, How Government Fat Cats Are Giving Rich Off You. He's written on free markets and environments, and his most recent book is The Socialist Temptation, which is I think is timely, mainly because, as I stated in my book, The Rise of National Populism and Democratic Socialism, which is available on Post Hill Press and Amazon.com. And which I did discuss is the Democratic Party becoming the Democratic Socialist Party of America. And certainly with the socialist temptation is there. We're going to be discussing that. And welcome to the show, Ian.
It's great to be with you tonight, Tom.
Yes. Well, here's the thing. You and I were talking off the air, and I wanted to kind of, we kind of talked about there was a couple of things, before we get into the meat of the book. But this is one subject you do talk about in your book. But Richard Spencer, the neo-Nazi, recently endorsed Joe Biden. And if anybody's read my book, The Rise of National Populism, Democratic Socialism, I talk about the fact that Richard Spencer and his ilk are in many ways far closer in their economic thinking to a good portion of the socialist movement than there ever were to the free market side. So I'm not that totally surprised that he's endorsing Joe Biden based on that. But kind of talk about that connection with the so-called alt-right neo-Nazis and socialism. Would you view him as a socialist?
Well, indeed, it's a very old connection. I talk about it briefly in the Socialist Temptation that Ludwig von Mises, the great Austrian economist, thought that there was only a trivial technicality of difference between socialism and fascism. And when you look at the economic policies that the fascists and socialists both prefer, it's easy to see why he said that. Socialism is based on the principle that there is something wrong with the economy when it's directed by free individuals. And that's essentially the same with fascism. Fascism, if you look at the German model and the Italian model, they crack down a lot on the free decisions of industrialists. They allowed the industrialists to continue operating, but they had to do so under very, very stringent circumstances and very close control. In fact, in many ways, it's very similar to what to the Chinese model of capitalism at the moment under Xi. All three of these regimes have a very controlling attitude to private business and industry, and that's very similar to socialism.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I made several months ago. I made I made this point on this show that China is Nazism of the 21st century, and I think that's an interesting point you make because there's a lot of similarity with, let's say, China's version of National Socialism, what Hitler's was, in the sense that, hey, you got political prisoners, you got concentration camp, you got slave labor, but while they allow a market to function, it's more on the condition of, okay, you can function, you can become billionaires, you can become rich, but we can take it away from you anytime we want if you don't serve the interests of the state. Would that be a fair description of where China is today?
I think so, and if you look at the parallels with especially with fascist Italy, they are very clear. State-organized cartels, dissolution of small companies, corporations being instructed to act in the national interest. All of those are elements of Chinese as well as of 1920s and 1930s Italian economics. The closer you look at it, the clearer the parallels are. A lot of Chinese companies, for instance, these days are forced to have reference to the Chinese Communist Party in their company charters. The level of state control compared with just 10 years ago in China is quite astonishing.
Yeah, so are you saying that in a way, are they kind of moving backwards in this regard then?
I think so. I think there was clearly a period in which China was becoming capitalist in the first decade of this century. The great economist Ronald Coase, his last book, which he wrote when he was over 100, was How China Became Capitalist. In some ways, I'm glad he didn't live to see the regression of the Chinese economy under Xi. Because it has been swift and it has been devastating.
Mm-hmm. Because I find it, which kind of brings me back to Richard Spencer, because one of the things in my book, and this, I remember getting into a discussion with a couple of these old writers. It was, and so I kind of, part of it was on Twitter, part of it was on other media, and I would ask them these questions, and I would say, do you guys view yourself as fascists? And is fascism good? I mean, they actually said yes, and then when I would say, what is the country we should model ourselves after? And it was almost unanimous. China was their very first choice. And I thought to myself, this is intriguing that, this would become, that this is what they're going to view as their very first choice. But we're going to explore that more in a little bit later. This is Tom Donelson with special guest Ian Murray of the Competitive Enterprise Institute here on the Donelson Files on the Bachelor News Radio Network.
This is Dr. Larry Fedowa, host of the Dr. Larry Show on the Bachelor News Radio Network, inviting you to listen live every Wednesday evening from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time at blogtalkradio.com, and the podcast every Monday through Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time at thebatchelornews.airtime.pro. I am called the philosopher of current events, an independent, open-minded conservative with my own ideas. If you are interested in advertising or having your own show, email us at labachelor40@gmail.com.
Also, don't forget the Locker Talk with Barry Bonds. Barry's where you can hear about the NFL stars of tomorrow. Today, listen to Barry every Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time at blogtalkradio.com, LA Bachelor. And at the podcast every day, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with back-to-back episode at the Bachelor News airtime.pro. Interested to have you know show and advertise, email us at labachelor40@gmail.com. Listen and stay informed. And also, tonight, if you want to call in at 646-929-0130. If you want to comment on tonight's show, again, 646-929-0130. And don't forget the Donelson Files. Not only are we, let's say, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on blogtalkradio.com Tuesday and Wednesday, but every day, 3 a.m. and 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the thebatchelornews.airtime.pro. So you can hear us every day, twice a day, plus twice on the Block Talk Radio Network. And now let's kind of follow up on, the kind of question because, as you stated, there is a regression occurring under China on this market side as they're starting to tighten up control. Maybe a question I'm going to ask, why are they doing that?
Well, it's very much a nationalist thing. There is they now call their version of capitalism with Chinese characteristics. This economic policy is explicitly nationalist. So we're seeing at the same time nationalist crackdowns on deviant populations. The Uyghurs of what used to be called Xinjiang province. I'm not quite sure what the current name is for it, but they have a different faith and a different ethnicity, so they are being rounded up, put in camps, abortions, forced abortions, even tales of infanticide going on there. So that's a classic fascist crackdown. And similarly, we're seeing Hong Kong being taken over with its different attitudes to the economy, very much based on the British history of free markets there in Hong Kong. We're seeing that being snuffed out before our eyes as well. The current Chinese government doesn't want to see anything that it views as deviant from its own nationalist Chinese way.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to also, a little bit later in the show, because you have also talked about the temptation, coming into, let's say, even within the political right today, and we'll explore that a little bit later. But the one question I might ask, somebody said to you, ask you this question, how would you define socialism?
That's the $3 trillion question these days, isn't it? I would define socialism as popular control of the means of production, distribution, or exchange, and that can be done through direct ownership by the people, in other words, by the government, or of all these means, or by micromanaging bureaucratic control and restriction. If you ask a young socialist these days what he or she means by socialism, you probably won't get that answer. You probably get something along the lines of a fairer society, something that looks a lot more like Europe, a society where the rich can't exploit people, where there is racial and gender justice. You will hear a lot of things. And they'll often be different depending on who you talk to, who claims that they're a democratic socialist. But the classic definition of socialism, that control of the means of production, distribution, and exchange, tends to be very low on their list these days. And so you have to wonder exactly what it is that the people really mean when they think about socialism. To a lot of people, I think it's just a buzzword. To other people, I think it's a deeply serious restructuring, or revolutionary restructuring of the American economy and society in general.
Let's try and follow up first of all. Look at the Nordic. What I'm going to use the word Nordic capitalist states. Certainly, for years and years, this has always been the model that they've talked about. Would you view Sweden, Finland, Norway, these countries as capitalist, socialist? How would you view them?
I would say that they used to be democratic socialist, but they realized that that this was leading them down an economic dark alley, and so they decided to abandon democratic socialism and become a social democracy. In a social democracy, you have a capitalist, quite vibrant capitalist society, but it includes high levels of taxation to pay for a large welfare state. That's different from socialism because they have given up the idea of control of the means of production, distribution, and exchange I mentioned earlier, and have allowed the private sector to take that back over. If you look at what countries like Sweden are doing, they are actually have introduced privatization into areas which America is reluctant to. For instance, school choice, education vouchers is the dominant model of education in Sweden. Meanwhile, they have recently been privatizing their social security system up to a point, so that you can invest in different funds to try and get a better return than the state would. And so neither of which would be particularly palatable to today's American democratic socialists. So that's why when you look at all the various indexes of economic freedom, Sweden and the U.S. are generally about equal, despite the presence of a very large welfare state and regressive taxation, which includes very heavy taxes on the middle class.
Okay, it's an interesting because you bring up in your book the various indexes, like the Heritage Foundation has an index, Cato Institute has an index, the Fraser Institute, the Canadian Fraser Institute, they all have various indexes to how they measure economic freedom in nations. And okay, here's the thing: the United States in the last Heritage rating, number 17. Sweden's number 22. Finland's 20. Norway's 28. Denmark is 8. I mean, they're like ahead of us. So, what is Denmark doing on the economic freedom side that we're not doing, that they can be ranked, higher than what this traditional capitalist United States?
Well, I think generally I'm not a great expert on Denmark particularly, but generally these countries have very strong property rights, a very strong legal system. They have significantly reduced their regulation. Many of these countries are much less tightly regulated than America is these days. And generally, they realize that they need a free economy to be able to pay for the welfare state that they like. And if it wasn't for the size of the welfare state, they'd be streets ahead of the U.S.
Right. Okay. Let me put it this way. Let's just say a Democratic, let's say an advocate of democratic socialism, and say, okay, the European model, and they look at you and they say, well, Mr. Murray, Australia is number 4th in the world with economic freedom. Ireland's number 6. New Zealand's number 3. Canada's number 9. Even Great Britain's ahead of the United States. They all have, for example, socialized medicine. Why can't we have socialized and still maintain our economic freedom like these countries? A single payer, whatever word you want to call it.
Well, this is a very interesting question because there are different models of socialized medicine around the world, and generally speaking, the models that are most socialized, such as the National Health Service in Great Britain, they tend to have the worst health outcomes. And so if you look at rankings of the health systems by outcomes, those countries are at the bottom. The more private involvement there is in the health service in these countries, I leave the U.S. aside at the moment because the U.S. System I don't think is a free market system of healthcare, despite the fact that everybody calls it that. So let's leave that aside at the moment. The more private involvement you have in the delivery of healthcare, generally speaking, the better the outcome is. Switzerland, for instance, has probably the best healthcare system in terms of outcome in the world, and it also has a very highly developed private healthcare delivery system alongside the governmental system. So, if you're talking about that real single payer healthcare where you pay for it all up front, and you go in and you're not charged when you go to the emergency room or to a doctor, then and you don't have any sort of stakeholder insurance, and the doctor is paid for directly by the government. That's where the health outcomes are the worst in the developed world. So to say that all of Europe has socialized healthcare, it sort of misses the point slightly, because not only have the countries with the best health outcomes in Europe got a considerable amount of private healthcare, they tend to be moving in the direction of even more. Even the National Health Service is moving in the direction of more private involvement. So to say that it's a question of either the government or a non-governmental private system, that misses the point, because there are huge gradations in private involvement in healthcare, even within Europe.
So what you're really saying is that they have their own form of fixture of private-public delivery system. Would that be a fair way to maybe explain that?
Yes, exactly. And most of these countries have realized that you can't just run healthcare on a traditionally socialist model, government control of everything. As was said when Britain introduced the National Health Service, the health minister said that he'd be responsible for every dropped bedpan in the nation. You can't run it like that. You have to have some form of private involvement. Otherwise, you have all the various tensions that apply to socialist economics apply to the health economics, and that just leads to very bad outcomes for the people that you're trying to help. So that's why virtually all of these countries have realized there has to be some substantial private involvement.
Mm-hmm. Hey, this is Tom Donelson on the Donelson Files. Don't forget, you can call in 646-929-0130. And also, if you're on Twitter right now, you can tweet at the Donelson Files. Tweet at the Donelson Files. And we'll also take your questions, and we'll try to answer them as well. So 646-929-0130 or at the Donelson Files. And don't forget, we do have a webpage, the DonelsonTFiles.com, which occasionally I will voice my opinion on things here and there. And even once in a while, Dr. Larry himself allows me to republish some of his work. And now back to Ian Murray of the Competitive Enterprise Institute, discussing his book, The Socialist Temptation. And before we go any further, where can people buy your book?
It's currently available at all the major online bookstores. So Amazon and Barnes and Noble. If you have an e-reader like a Kindle, you can buy it through the Kindle for the Kindle edition. And I believe it is currently making its way out, slowly, thanks to the COVID disruption of supply chains. But I think it's making its way out slowly to actual bookstores like Books A Million and so on.
Okay, good. And who is who published the book?
The publisher is Regnery. And if you go to their website, which I think is regnery.com, you can find it there as well.
Okay, good. So basically, you got a lot of different options of which you can, buy this book. And so, so we basically, in effect, what we're really saying is that the social welfare state, while maybe a little bit more extensive in certain areas in many of these countries, there's enough of a private sector involvement. In other words, and the means of production are necessarily not controlled by the government, but there is a functioning market economy, whether it's in Sweden, Great Britain, Australia, Canada, Finland. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes, absolutely. I grew up in Britain when it was a democratic socialist country. Everything had been nationalized after the war. And it was a pretty dreary and depressing place. You had to rely on the government to provide the trains for you to get for me to get to school, and constantly things were on strike. Industries were on strike for higher pay because they knew that they had leverage over the government, so they would go on strike, and the poor British citizen would suffer. Eventually, in 1979, it got to the stage where hospital workers went on strike, and at the same time, municipal garbage collectors went on strike, and even grave diggers went on strike. So you had hospitals were closed. There were piles of garbage in the streets, and the dead were lying unburied. And that's when the British people turned around and said, no, we've had enough of this. We're going to elect Margaret Thatcher, and she's going to roll back the frontiers of the state. We're going to get rid of this socialism, and we're going to go back to being a private country with private industry country with genuine free markets. And Mrs. Thatcher did that so well that Tony Blair, the Labour Party, premier for 10 years, basically followed her example and kept Britain a private sector country when a lot of people were expecting him to try to return to socialism.
Yeah, hold on that thought. We're going to talk after this break. This is Tom Donelson, the Donelson Files with Ian Murray, talking his book, The Socialist Temptation. And we're going to pursue, why hasn't socialism been taken up in America? Is there a special innocuous? Is there something that we've been able to do here to keep it from coming in? And is that temptation stronger today? So this is Tom Donelson on the Donelson Files on the Bachelor News Radio Network.
Go Caleb! Come on, hit a homer, Jesse!
Let's go, guys!
Hey, did you guys know that kids who play sports earn more money when they grow up?
Of course. I knew that.
Hey, did you guys know that kids who read books have a bigger vocabulary?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Wow, jinx. Did you guys know that friendly children have more friends?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
That's true. I knew that. Did you guys know that winter babies are better at music?
Everyone knows that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, pretty obvious.
Yeah, so
yeah.
obvious.
Oh, hey, guys, did you know that most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Huh, I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure I knew that.
I'm pretty sure you didn't.
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right car seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the-right-seat to make sure your child is protected. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Tom Donelson, Donelson Files, back. Welcome back. And if you want to call in, 646-929-0130. You can also tweet us at Donelson Files on Twitter. And here on the Bachelor News Radio Network. And don't forget, every day at the thebatchelornews.airtime.pro, you can listen to the show 3 a.m. and 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time here on the Bachelor News Radio Network, one of the fastest growing network there is. Now, let's kind of, why has, let's say, over the years, taken hold in the United States, socialism, or the idea of socialism?
Well, I think that America suffered from two waves, as it were, of socialism light. I think during the progressive era, back at the turn of the 19th, 20th century, there was a move for much more government oversight of the economy, and then during the New Deal, there was an attempt to nationalize and control a lot of American industry with things like the National Recovery Administration and so on. But those failed to turn into real socialism because I think that there were two things that were inoculating Americans from going down the full way to popular control of the means of production, distribution, and exchange. I think the first would be unsurprising, which is that businesses stood up for themselves and said, "No, we don't want this. We are going to oppose these methods." And so businessmen would fund things like the Liberty League. And then in the 1970s, the creation of the Heritage Foundation and other think tanks that were there to oppose this government control of the economy. But the other source of opposition, I think, is a surprising one. It was American labor unions. American labor unions actually, especially under some of the early leaders of the AFL, like Samuel Gompers and so on, they strongly opposed socialism. They viewed it was their job was to get the best deal for their workers, not for their members, not for not to be revolutionaries and to bring about societal change, and that, they recognize that job for them of getting the best deal for their members meant that the industries that they were working in, they had to be profitable and have good growth prospects and the rest. So they recognized that a liberal capitalist economy was actually better for them than a socialist economy. I think both of those have changed. I think we've seen American business has moved much more towards the attitude of trying to buy off government or work with government rather than try to oppose the expansion of government. And similarly, labor unions have, because of some changes in the 1960s, labor unions have become much more dominated by government workers rather than private sector workers, and so they see the expansion of government as being a good thing for them when they previously did not.
Yeah, let me kind of follow up on the other aspect as well. Would you say the radical, is there a much more, like in colleges today, I'm going to say that you have a much more different, let's say, professorship. I mean, certainly in the days of, let's say, the 70s or the 80s, I would use the word liberals, where there was not necessarily liberals as far as today. It's a much more radical set of professorship.
Yes, I think that's very much the case. If you look at the surveys of the professoriate, the liberals and conservatives were about equal through the 1980s, and then through the 1990s, there began to be many more liberals than conservatives, and now it's got to the stage where there are very few conservatives. In fact, they are outnumbered by those who regard themselves as radical leftists in the professoriate. So there's been a very sudden change there, and also when you consider that there are a lot of disciplines where politics doesn't really enter into it, especially engineering and the like. So when you consider that those will be more immune to politicization than, say, the humanities, you realize then that probably means that the humanities are almost uniformly liberal or extreme left now, with very few conservatives indeed. So that's been a considerable change.
Yeah, I guess maybe because, like I say, I'm going to say in my own lifetime, I've never seen it treated more seriously as an ideal. I look at the Democratic Party, and if you look at, let's say, somebody like Bernie Sanders, in the 1980s, he was a backbencher. But on two separate occasions, he was like the number 2 guy running for president within the nomination, and a good portion of his ideas are now pretty much the platform. Alexander Cortez's rise to power in a short period of time, and their Democratic Socialist, the squad, what do you call their primal squad? They too have now become serious players within the Democratic Party. So I mean, I'm looking at this is something that in my lifetime, certainly if you look at, let's say, the 1990s, Bill Clinton, like Tony Blair, basically accepted Reaganism and just simply say we're the new Democrats. Today, that's been totally rejected. Your thoughts?
Yes, I think if we go back to college, then there's a very interesting statistic that astonished me. My colleague Phil Magnus did research into the all the syllabuses that have been posted online at American universities, and he worked out that the second most prescribed text in all of American universities, leaving aside things like Elements of Style and things like that. The second most prescribed text is actually the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And that this, of course, isn't being prescribed in engineering class. It generally isn't being prescribed in economics class. But it is being prescribed in a lot of classes which you wouldn't think had any real relevance to communism. It's being prescribed in English class. It's being prescribed in history class. It's being prescribed in anthropology, in sociology, in any of the classes that have the word studies after it. It's almost universally prescribed in those classes, and so it should come as no surprise to us that the younger generation is much more open to socialism if they are being forced to read this foundational text of socialism, and are not being asked to read anything by, say, Friedrich Hayek. Or any of the great, or Milton Friedman, or any of the great free market economists in opposition to it.
This is Tom Donelson on the Donelson Files with Ian Murray on the Bachelor News Radio Network.
Tune in to You and the Law with Chief Virgil Green and Chief Keith Humphrey. The show focuses on law enforcement and their relationship with the black community while letting you know your legal rights as a citizen when confronted by the police. Listen live every Tuesday night from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern at blogtalkradio.com and the podcast every Monday through Sunday at 4 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern at thebatchelornews.airtime.pro.
And also the Life Cafe broadcast from Maximizing Life Family Worship Center located at 2920 East Market Street in Greensboro, North Carolina. The broadcast features a Bible study-like atmosphere while taking a laid-back approach to learning the Word of God, served with a free continental breakfast. Can't beat that. Listen to this broadcast every Sunday evening at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at thebatchelornews.airtime.pro. And remember, if you're interested in having your own show or just advertising on the fastest-growing network, email us at labachelor40@gmail.com. Hey, listen and stay informed. And don't forget, the You and the Law does follow the Donelson Files tonight on the Blog Talk Radio Network. And don't forget, you can listen to our show on the thebatchelornews.airtime.pro, 3 a.m. to 10 a.m. If you want to get in on this conversation, it's 646-929-0130. 646-929-0130. And before we get to the next question, just kind of remind everybody, Ian, where they can get your books.
Yes,
online and bookstores. Go ahead.
Yes, you can get it online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. So you can order the hard copy from them. If you have an e-reader like a Kindle, then you can get the Kindle version. You can get an audio version from Amazon as well, if you'd like to sort of listen to it on CD in the car. And if you want to go out to a bookstore, then slowly but surely, I believe that the bookstores are starting to get the copies in now.
Well, good. And also regnery.com.
Regnery.com, REGNERY.com is the publisher, and so you can get it direct from them as well if you don't want to go via Amazon.
Okay, welcome. Okay, back to our discussion here. Okay, we talked about the colleges. We talked about the temptation. How about the question of inequality? Because, again, the biggest complaints one has against free market economics, inequality. It's just there is an aspect of inequality of income between groups, between individuals. What in your book you kind of discussed this. So, kind of summarize first of all exactly the inequality issue as you see it. Is it a problem, or is it a reflection of the system? What would you say?
Well, yes. A few years ago, when the big question of politics was income inequality, my colleague Ryan at Young and I looked at this and we realized that there was a bit of a sort of leisure demand going on here, a sort of a sleight of hand. The inequality sounds like it's going to be a problem if we are talking about inequality of opportunity. Inequality of opportunity is a bad thing. If you are forced to start out off behind the curve, then the chances of you catching up are going to be less. So traditionally, American concepts of inequality have centered around this. Recently, we've seen a sort of sleight of hand. So it's now all about inequality of outcome. Or equity, as they call it now. So even if you have had exactly the same opportunity, but you have done less well than somebody else, then that is viewed as a sign that there is something wrong with the system. So there's been a sort of a sleight of hand change there between inequality of opportunity and inequality of outcome. But beyond all of this, there is a bigger question with the whole inequality debate, which is how are the poor actually doing? And that's something that the socialists and their philosophers and their economists like Thomas Piketty, they never really answer that question. And that's because under the capitalist system, the poor have been doing so much better than the poor have under any other system. It's visible in all the data, in all the economic indexes and so on. The poor do better under capitalism than they do under any other system. So we are left trying to find ways to massage the data. For instance, they will say that the middle class is shrinking, with the assumption being that this is because people in the middle class are becoming poorer. All the data suggests that the number of poor people has reduced, like I've just said, and the number of middle class people is reducing because many more people are moving into the well-off to rich brackets than have ever done before. So in all of these things, you have to look beyond the simple accusation that inequality is a problem, and look at the actual data. And when you do that, and you look and you see how the poor and the middle class are actually doing, then you will realize that inequality isn't nearly the problem that it's being made out to be.
Yeah. Well, let me okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate here in this way. I just say to you, like during the Reagan years and even throughout the Clinton years going into this century, the middle class and the poor were going up the economic ladder. You can make that argument. Could you say, let's say between 2009 and let's say the most recent recession, have you seen a falling back? Falling back on that, where maybe the middle class is feeling squeezed, feeling that squeeze, and maybe instead of seeing their income always going up, it's either stagnating and certainly one can look at the number of workers, let's say between 2009 and the present, where where labor participation has been lower among those 25 to 55. What would be your response to that?
Well, I think when it comes to this question, again, we actually have to look beyond the sort of headlines and try and look at what the causes may be of people who are feeling squeezed, because undoubtedly there are some people who are feeling squeezed. A lot of them in the country's heartland. But when you look at it, it's not necessarily caused by capitalist disruption, the sort of general disruption that you will get in any free market economy. It tends to be a failure of adjustment, and in other words, people lose a job. In normal circumstances, there'd be one there to go to, but there isn't one. A different job to go to, but there isn't one. So why is that? And when you look beyond the data, then you see that this is almost always caused by excessive regulation, which is stopping new businesses from forming to take up the opportunity of a skilled workforce which suddenly needs jobs, or by excessive taxation, which is also having a similar effect. If you look at the figures for dynamism, which is basically the number of new businesses that are forming, that's where there is a really big problem in this country at the moment. And that isn't the fault of capitalism. Capitalism wants to create those new businesses, but all the regulation that we've piled on throughout the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and up until 2016, all that regulation that was piled on to businesses has had a devastating effect on dynamism. It's difficult to hire people. It's difficult to raise money to start a new business. It's difficult to find the money to pay to fuel your business, all because of regulation on labor, regulation on finance, regulation on the environment. All of these things come together to mean that escape valve that the economy needs of the creation of new businesses just isn't there, and that's what really harms the heartland and leads to the middle class feeling as if they're being squeezed.
Let me kind of talk one thing, because we got about a few minutes left in the show. Okay, we got the Republican National Convention, and certainly somewhere along the line, renegotiating or the new NAFTA. Now, you are critical of the new NAFTA in your book. Did you explain, your criticism of the Trump approach to NAFTA?
Well, yes. I mean, what I was just talking about with restrictions on from labor and the environment regulation, that's very much in play in the replacement of NAFTA. NAFTA had side agreements that imposed regulation in these two areas. The new USMCA actually embodies those within the agreement. So this agreement is actually basically a regulatory harmonization across North America, when what you really need is regulatory competition, where people can say, oh well, if we got rid of this regulation, we'll have an advantage over Canada, and then Canada will think, oh well, we better get rid of that regulation too, and dynamism will increase, and there'll be more trade and more business, and that wealth will reach out to everybody. Prices will be lower, incomes will be higher. Unfortunately, USMCA didn't take that approach. It took this approach of harmonization, which has led to, which will lead to a growing sclerosis across the North American economy, exactly the same way that we saw in Europe when they decided to harmonize all their regulation in the European Union.
Hey, let's kind of maybe as a follow-up to that question, because there is the socialist temptation, and we only got a couple minutes left, but okay, is Trump and many Republicans, and I'm going to take like Tucker Carlson as an example, are talking less and less free market approaches and more of an industrial policy, more of a, like, for example, I've always kind of viewed NAFTA as managed trade, and the idea will try to increase trade, but there's that managed aspect of it. The European Union have been doing that. We've seen that temptation going even beyond what we've done in the past among some of those on the right. Yeah,
I think this is a very big problem. People are looking and they're seeing that those problems I mentioned earlier with the middle class being squeezed and there being no relief in sight. So they're thinking, well, okay, if we get elected on a platform of relief for this, what's the easiest way to do it? Well, the easiest way to do it is to have some sort of government program that will get businesses back to the heartland. So if we clamp down on trade, then those businesses will have to come back. The trouble is, as long as you have these restrictive regulations and punitive taxation rules in place, that's probably not going to happen. So in the end, you'll say, okay, well in that case we'll need to have subsidies and so on, and then all you're doing is basically doing exactly the same thing as the socialists do, which is saying that the bureaucrats can decide which industries need to be where in America, and that's not a recipe for economic success. Every time industrial policy has been tried around the world, we've seen the economy stagnate. And eventually people come to their senses and say, let's have free markets again. And so hopefully that will happen soon.
Okay, so before we look and go off before we go in the show, I want to thank you very much for being on the show. Ian Murray, the book, it's A Socialist Temptation. And there's one quick thing. Why don't you talk very briefly about the Competitive Enterprise Institute and where people can find out more about the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Go ahead.
Yes, Competitive Enterprise Institute is a think tank based in Washington, D.C. We were founded in 1984 because our founder, Fred Smith, was very concerned about this rise in regulation that he was seeing. So we exist to draw attention to that and provide policy ideas for reducing the burdens of regulation and increasing the dynamism of American society. We are on the web at CEI.org, CEI.org. We're on Twitter at CEI.org, one word. And we have lots of ideas there, and lots of my colleagues, like John Berlau, who was on your show recently, they post at the Open Market blog there, so you can see what ideas we're trying to push.
Well, thank you very much, sir, and I appreciate you taking your time being on the show. This is Ian Murray, The Socialist Temptation, and also associated with the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Don't forget, tomorrow night is Ladies' Night with Coco Konski, Lauren Bies, Cece Harrison, and your ladies, you want to participate because they'll talk relationships, and nothing is taboo with the three of them, so you'll love that show. Tom Donelson saying good night from the Donelson Files and the Bachelor News Network.
Hey, we want to welcome you to You and the Law on the Bachelor News Radio Network. You are listening to one of the co-hosts of the show, Chief Virgil Green, and the host of the show, the Chief Swag, Keith Humphrey. How you doing today, sir?
What's going on, Virgil?
Not a whole lot, brother. It's not a whole lot, man. I mean, there's a lot going on, but man, we've got a lot to talk about over the next hour on the You and the Law on the Bachelor News Radio Network, and so it's a good day. It's a good day, sir.
Man, anytime I can be on the show with you, man, produced by LA, man, it's a good day, man.
Oh, hey, man, we definitely got to send a shout out to LA for allowing us to be on his network and to bring to our listeners a show that is informative, where we discuss law enforcement topics and we discuss, your rights as citizens when dealing with law enforcement. Coming from two, veteran law enforcement officers. So, Keith, I think, if we have some new listeners, we'll just kind of introduce ourselves, about our backgrounds, history in law enforcement, to where, our new listeners can understand the experience and knowledge that we have with the topics that we talk about.
Yeah, I think, we've got over 60 years of law enforcement experience combined, and, we've got some pretty, I think we're kind of knowledgeable in the areas that we talk about, but we keep it real. We keep it real. We don't try to sugarcoat it. If it's something that in law enforcement that doesn't seem right, we'll talk about it. If it's something that seems appropriate, we'll talk about it. But the main thing is we want the citizens, the listeners, to feel free to call in and ask questions. So don't feel like there's any question you can't ask us. And if we don't have the answer, we'll get it for you.
Definitely. And, one of the things that, you touched on is the fact that we're open and honest about the topics that we talk about. Oftentimes, people will say, you guys don't sound like you're police chiefs, or you guys sound like you're against the police, but we're not, Keith. Our perspective is that we want to be informative, and we want citizens to know what their rights are, but we also want to make sure that the officers understand what citizens' rights are when they're dealing with them, so their rights are not violated, and so we don't end up with circumstances of that we continue to see with the protesting and the things that have come about that's led up to those protesting. So it's just a good way to have this conversation with our listeners, Keith, and the fact that I don't think there's not that many podcast shows that address law enforcement topics the way we are taking that on, and so hopefully the listeners are become more knowledgeable. And again, we want to remind, if you're a first-time listener, the call-in number to the show is 646-929-0130, and that's 646-929-0130. And for those of you who are new to the show, you can follow us on our social media. You can follow us on Facebook at You and the Law. You can follow us on Instagram. That's You_in_the_law. You can also follow us on Twitter at the law at You_the_law_1. So there's a lot of ways you can reach out to us and share some comments. But if you do call into the show, let the producer know that you've got a comment or a question, or you'd like to come on air. If you would just like to leave your comment, and he'll share that comment with us. But Keith, just a good open dialogue about the things that continue to happen across the country with law enforcement, and we're going to talk about some citizens' rights when dealing with the police, but we can't overlook what has happened in the last 48 hours, Keith. What happened in Wisconsin, and then also what happened in Lafayette. I think what happened in Lafayette is kind of on a local level is there, but on a national level, the attention has definitely been shifted toward what has happened in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's true. We had a few protesters out last night, showing their support for the family of the gentleman who was killed in Kenosha. And, there was a press conference today regarding his condition and the concern from the community. And from what I gather, he's paralyzed from the waist down and had to go back into surgery. So it's a sad situation.
Yeah, it is. And, Keith, just a week ago, I believe not even a week ago, last Friday, in Lafayette, Louisiana, the police department is coming under scrutiny after, again, a citizen's cell phone footage caught multiple officers shooting a black male who was armed with a knife, but who was walking away from the officers. Where it's believed that they shot him somewhere over 11 times, multiple police officers, or maybe just one officer. But he, again, they tased him. It didn't have any impact on him. He continued to walk down the street. But you had a young lady, one of the videos I've seen where I think she's the only one may have recorded it, caught everything that took place leading up to them shooting this gentleman as he tried to enter into a convenience store. So, and then you've got this is going on in the protesting is still going on in Louisville with Breonna Taylor, where, Keith, I think it's almost like 90 days of protesting that has occurred in Louisville, and most of them have been peaceful, not to the level of destruction of private property as we've seen in Wisconsin. So it's some challenging times for law enforcement.
Oh, it extremely is, and I don't think we're going to see the concerns of the citizens. I don't think we're going to see those go silent anytime soon. I think we're going to continue. But, I think the thing that bothers me the most is the destruction of the community. I understand the frustration. I understand the being tired of being tired, but I still to this day don't understand the purpose of the destruction, especially in communities of color, when those a lot of them are locally owned businesses, and even the businesses that may not be locally owned, they employ people in that community, and so that's one of the most disheartening and gut wrenching things when you see property being damaged. Yeah,
you're absolutely correct, and one of the things that we're going to talk about is a video that we shared on our You and the Law Facebook page, and we're going to give a chance for our listeners to listen to the audio clip of that once we come back from break. But to set this up, Keith, so many people have reached out about what are their rights when dealing with the police on their private property, and we're going to talk about that when we come out of the break, and we're going to listen to an audio clip once we come back from the break. But you're listening to You and the Law on the Bachelor News Radio Network.
He don't even know my name and tell him I have a warrant. What did he do? That's what I'm saying. For what? For what? Warrant from Louisiana. For what? For what? Yeah. I don't even live in Louisiana.
All right, so tonight we'd like to know what you think about this video. Is this a case of racial profiling?
Or is the deputy just doing his job after getting a tip about a fugitive spotted in a neighborhood in Northeast Harris County? The heated confrontation was caught on camera, and tonight we are talking to both sides.
So we definitely want you to weigh in. So get your phones, open the KHU 11 app, go to KHU.com, look for the Vote Now section in the menu.
But before you vote, here is Larry Seward at the Harris County Precinct 4 Constable's Office with the full story. Larry?
Mia, the man in that video cussing out deputies, says he felt profiled, his civil rights violated, while Constable Mark Herman saw no wrong.
My name is not Quentin.
All agree bad info led to that near arrest, debated and seen over 1 million times on Facebook. But how it started.
Yeah, I was frightened. I was terrified.
Has Clarence Evans III, his family and lawyer,
He took two men with dreadlocks and decided that they were the same person.
at odds with cops.
That is not profiling. That's an officer doing their job.
Evans claims Deputy Garrett Lindley showed up alone, asking about the family's dog, saying it was missing. When told no,
So he said, okay, well, I'm going to just write a report and get out your hair. And he asked me for my ID. And I told him I didn't feel I need to ID myself because I'm on my property. I'm on my private property. So he asked me, well, what's your name? I told him my name is Clarence. And that's when he told me, no, your name is Reg, and you have a warrant out of Louisiana.
You touching me while you shaking. You need to step back and calm down. No.
Evans' wife recorded her husband cussing out the deputy who grabbed her husband's arm, called him Reg, Quentin, then looked at a photo of the fugitive and let Evans go.
And that was the only thing we had in common was dreads and skin complexion.
Precinct 4 Constable Mark Herman told us the deputy did no wrong. He just reacted to a caller's tip. In a statement, his spokesman added, the deputy was there on official business based on a report that a wanted fugitive was near the location. The deputies left when they determined that this man was not the suspect they were seeking.
If this officer just rolled up without a call for service, without a civilian saying this is a guy with a warrant, I would feel very differently about this case.
Houston Police Union President Joe Camaldi said Evans should have just obeyed, but the way things started, Evans felt lied to and in danger.
Especially what just happened with the HPD and 2 people lost their lives behind a warrant.
Last year, a grand jury no-billed the deputy involved for shooting someone else. Evans' family now wants him fired, but so far, Constable Herman sees no reason for it. And Constable Herman points out that Evans has filed no formal complaint to this point. He and his lawyer told me they are still gathering information, and they did not rule out filing a complaint or a lawsuit. We're live in Spring. Larry Seward, KHU 11 News.
Hey, we want to welcome you back to You and the Law on the Bachelor News Radio Network. You just listened to a audio clip recording from a local news station out of the Houston area where a man was in his front yard. He was approached by a sheriff constable who saw him outside. He stopped him, basically said that he was accused him of being another person, and he was not that person. And he attempted to arrest him based on the fact that he said that he had a warrant out of Louisiana. So, what I think, Keith, one of the things that's really kind of concerning, and it goes back to the public's attitude toward law enforcement and that lack of trust, is when you hear one of the officials with this agency says that this constable didn't do anything wrong, that he was there on official business. And to see that the picture that he had on his cell phone of a man in another state that he's trying to arrest, making an arrest, there's some concerns with that, and I think that's why people are asking the question: what rights do they have on their property in a situation like this here? So that is something that hope our listeners. If you got any questions or any comments about what you just heard, please feel free to call into the show at 646. 929-0130 as we talk about that video, the audio that we just listened to. But the video is actually on our Facebook page, so you can actually watch that video. So there's a lot of questions about how that was handled, Keith.
Yeah, and I think that there is some confusion what an officer's rights are and what a citizen's rights are when it comes to their property. And it goes back to what we've always said: an officer has to have probable cause or reasonable suspicion of probable cause to come onto your property. We can't cross the line when it comes to private property. We still have to have a right. So an investigation that we have received, something that we see in our view, in our presence, something imminent, we do have that. We do have that right. I think there was a way to handle that, and I think the way was, hey man, how's it going? Listen, I got this warrant, or I got this picture of this person that looks similar to you. You mind if I ask you your name? And if this is not you, I get on about my business. I think that goes a long way than basically trying to force this man to give you your ID. Now, I think there's people that would argue with that, is that he was doing his job. Nobody's saying the officer wasn't doing his job. What we're saying is there probably was a different way to approach that. Number one, I wouldn't be out there alone trying to serve a warrant. That's the first thing. Because if it does go south, it does heighten the potential of you having to use some type of force up to lethal force. So that's number one. And number two, the communication could have been better. But, we've got to quit being so defensive. But at the same time, what would have been wrong for the gentleman to say, hey, this is my name, this is my ID, that's not me. Okay, we're gone. So I think sometimes we get so caught up in the fact that it's private property. We get so caught up in the fact that officers don't have a right to do this. We, as citizens sometimes can contribute to it, but at the same time, we're the ones that know the law. We're the ones that know we just can't walk on people's property for no reason, and we're the ones that know that we were talking about de-escalation and procedural justice. And sometimes I don't think we do a really good job of following those, the procedural justice or de-escalation tactics, or just the emotional intelligence, or the fact of, hey, just tell people why you're there. I think we can do a better job of that.
Yeah. And hey, we want to make sure that we remind those our listeners that if you call into the show, the calls are being screened. So if you would like to come on air and have a comment with us on air, let the producer of the show know that. Or if you don't have a comment, just say you don't, and you're just going to listen to the show, or you would like to leave a comment. But you also can go into the chat room on the Bachelor News Radio Network and leave those comments on in the chat room. So because apparently, Keith, this is a pretty hot topic, and we're going to definitely have a lot of people asking questions about this topic. And so L.A., I think he had something that he wants to come on and mention about.
Yeah, good evening, guys. One person had mentioned maybe with Chief Humphrey's comment about, destroying property. He said in his neighborhood, a lot of the small businesses are silent and on deaf ears when cops come in and do bad things. So he said maybe some of these neighborhoods they're targeting because some of these businesses are the enablers of bad cops. And I would add that what you said, Chief Green, in regards to compliance, and again, that's in a perfect world. But for some of us, we already been being harassed forever. And then he's going to come on my property and question me on top of it? So it's already going to be some attitude there because we already been dealing with them, with some bad cops. And now you're going to get a cop to come on your property and demand to know who you are. So I can relate to that, brother. I'm not saying he's right, but I can relate to him. So I'll let you guys respond to those two comments.
Okay. All right. Well, and I'll just jump in and say, in reference to the audio clip that we listened to, I think the constable started off on the wrong foot. I think he was misleading as to why he was there. He stated he was there in reference to some kind of animal complaint or something with a dog, and then he said, "Oh, I'll just take a report. So I need to get your information." So, he had driven by and saw this gentleman from his patrol car. Based on the picture that he had on his cell phone, he assumed that this gentleman in the yard was the person that had an outstanding warrant in another state, not in the county that he was in, but had a warrant out of another state. And so, you can understand the homeowner's reaction in the fact that his wife, she's recording it on her cell phone, and the fact that told the officer what his name was, but the officer didn't believe him. And so now you go back and forth, and I think you have some people who will say, well, why not just tell him who you are? Why not just show him your ID? But you got that side of a black man who, and it could even be a white person, but I think we see it more so with black men, where why do I have to prove to you who I am when I didn't call you and you're here on something that I don't know anything about? So that's where you get the power struggle from the police saying, well, I've got the authority. You need to tell me who you are. If you don't, then I'm going to take you to jail. Or it can end up going in a different direction. But then you've got the property owner who's basically saying, no, I don't have to tell you who I am. So, again, Keith, just listening, watching the video and not just listening to it, the constable was definitely misleading to the homeowner as to why he was there on his property.
Yeah, you and I in LA talked about this the other day. You can't walk on a person's property, especially a man's property, and tell that man what he can do and what he can't do. Now, like I said earlier, there are those incidents where everything's imminent, and you do have to go on the property because you're investigating. But I think you can still leave a person with their dignity. You can't tell a man that it's difficult for you, and you have to understand that you tell a man that he's got to shut up on his property. You tell a man he's lying. We've got to stop thinking that everybody's lying to us, and we've got to stop thinking that we've got to have this John Wayne mentality with everyone we deal with because somebody says, I'm not going to give you a name or I'm not going to do this. You got to stop that. There's a way to handle now. Somebody gets too combative and resistant and it gets physical, that's a different situation. But I still say there was a way to handle that. Hey, man, this is the deal. Yeah. You look like this guy. May not be you. We could solve this really quick, man. What's your name? Here's a picture of this guy. As you can see, it's a resemblance. Is this you or not? The guy probably would have pulled out his ID and said, man, this is me. This is my name, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we go on about our business. But when you start, on a person's property, as we say in the hood, disrespecting me on my property and calling me a liar, we're going to have some problems.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, with this situation in the Houston area where, he called this man by another name, the man is telling him, my name isn't so-and-so, my name is Quentin, and, this is who I am. So why do I need to prove to you who I am when I don't even know why you're even here? So it just goes back to that trust. That's why people continue to say they have this lack of trust with law enforcement. But, Keith, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to You and the Law on the Bachelor News Radio Network.
Greetings and great day, everyone. I am Elder Janelle Strickland, host of the Life Cafe radio broadcast. From maximizing life Family Worship Center. I invite you to tune in every Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. Tune in, maximize your life with the Word of God, and be blessed. Only on the Bachelor News Radio Network.
We want to welcome you back to You and the Law on the Bachelor News Radio Network. We want to remind our listeners that the calling number to the show is 646-929-0130. That's 646-929-0130. And also, we want to remind you of the many other great shows that are on the Bachelor News Radio Network. And one of those shows is Locker Talk with Barry Bonds. Barry, you can listen to Barry as he talks about the NFL stars of tomorrow, today. You can listen to Barry every Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time at blogtalkradio.com. And on the podcast every day from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with back-to-back episodes at thebatchelornews.airtime.pro. And if you're interested in having your own show on the Bachelor News Radio Network, or if you're interested in advertising on the Bachelor News Radio Network, you can reach out to us at labachelor40@gmail.com. That's labachelor40@gmail.com. And, listen to the great show, the many other shows that's on the Bachelor News Radio Network, and listen and stay informed. And one of the shows that you can definitely stay informed with is You and the Law, Keith. We're talking about citizens' rights when dealing with police on their property, and that clip that we listened to a little while ago, it could have definitely went a different way. The officer could have said that this man was resisting arrest. He could have put out a gun. He could have shot him. So many things could have happened. But you have to ask yourself, officers go through so much training, and they know what they can and cannot do, but we continue to see these repetitive incidents across the country, Keith, where officers lose their composure. They begin to assault citizens. They begin to mislead citizens. They lie to citizens. And this video, at the end of this incident in the Houston area, Keith, the officer really looked at pretty incompetent. He looked at, pretty, and I hate to use the word stupid, but I just have to say it is the way it is that he realized that, oh, well, hey, you're not the person that I thought you were. So now he gets in the car and drives away. But he has ruined any chance of.
What's wrong with saying I'm sorry, man?
Yeah, he never said.
It was wrong
he
with
never
saying that,
Yeah. And I believe he was a sergeant with that department. But what people really need to understand, what we want our listeners to understand, is that officers, there's a lot of training that is put into police officers, and the officers really need to utilize that training and know how to approach. I don't care if you're black, white, Spanish, whatever race you are, learn how to approach the citizens that you're dealing with, because that police officer ruined any chance of him having a positive relationship with this person in his neighborhood. And now that man is going to tell his neighbors what happened, and they may see it because this video has been viewed, I think, something around 20 million times. So, but the disturbing thing, I go back and say, Keith, is that you've got an agency who doesn't even acknowledge that this was something that shouldn't have happened. Basically, the officer didn't do anything wrong. He had a legitimate reason for being there. So that's why the public feels the way they do with police officers across the country. And, people will always say, and we will always acknowledge, that there's a lot of good men and women in law enforcement, but it is the bad ones are the ones that continue to be recorded by citizens or even on their own body cam doing things that are violating a person's rights.
I'm still trying to get over the fact that he didn't say, hey, man, I made a mistake, or hey, I'm sorry, or can we talk about this? Can you understand where I'm coming from? And then I'm still getting over the fact of you're going to go out and serve a warrant, and just say that if you were going to serve this warrant or this was the person, you're going to go out and serve this warrant by yourself. By yourself. Not with a backup, by yourself. That right there just gets me. I don't get that. Yeah.
And I guess, Keith, we when LA came on, he had a few comments and we definitely we want to make sure we reply to the comments with our listeners. So the comments were related to how the officers are interacting with citizens. I believe, Keith, unless you have some follow up on the comments that LA discussed when he came on air with us.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the other part was about damaging property, and said that bad experience with police and with the businesses can cause that. And I still say I get it. I get people get frustrated, but this is what the media shows. The media, the nation doesn't see, or what it doesn't see the bad actions of that business owner or that policeman. What they see is they see individuals, whether they're from that neighborhood, that community or not, damaging property, setting things on fire, breaking windows, looting. That's what they see. And so if you're trying to send a message that you're tired of what's going on in the community, it doesn't send the right message when the nation sees you damaging the properties in your community, where people have to shop and where people have to, and some people have options. Some people have options. They may not have to shop at that store. They may not have to buy gas at that station. But there are individuals in that community that depend on and rely on those to get some of the basic needs. So you don't damage it. If you just don't damage property no matter what. If you're going to protest, you protest. You do so peacefully. You're not remembering or you're not honoring the name of an individual that may have been killed by law enforcement. You're not honoring them by damaging and tearing up and looting and hurting people. You honor them by, if you want to boycott, you honor them by speaking to your state, local, and national and federal representatives. You honor them by making local officials listen to you, make the police chief listen to you. You honor them by getting things changed, but not by damaging property and hurting people. You don't honor people that way.
No, and that was one of the things, Keith, that the mother stated in Wisconsin about her son, that to those people who have been out destroying property, the things that they are doing is not going to change anything that happened to her son. So by them destroying car dealerships, I think there was a car dealership that was totally destroyed, $1.5 million worth of vehicles destroyed. Well, when you destroyed that car dealership, you've put people who work at that car dealership out of a job in the middle of a pandemic, and now they've got to figure out where they're going to work at. And so the actions of people that are a part of these protests can have long-lasting impacts on communities. And sometimes you see some of these protesters are not from the communities.
They're not. But
I
think we may have gotten some confusion on that. I think what he was saying is that I think what we're saying is a good point, but I believe that we missed the point of there are people who feel and get disappointed when you have those companies that support bad policing and stand up and say, you know, and there have been major businesses. You know, we don't want to say any names or anything, but there have been major businesses that have shown their support for the FOP and shown their support. The officer that in Minneapolis, they've shown their support for some of the things that have come from Washington, have come from the White House regarding law enforcement support on some of the way they respond. And so I think there are people that I know there are people that get frustrated, especially people of color who get frustrated when you have a big box stores who condone and support these kind of actions. So I can see the frustration, and I can imagine that. But I still say it is very, very. It's still not right to damage property in your neighborhoods. There's still another way to get the point across. Boycott, meetings, and there's so many other ways. I just hate to see property damaged. Got the frustration. Understand that. Years and years of oppression. Understand that. But I still think damaging property is the wrong way to send a message.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think, you know, everybody has an opinion about how things are being played out. But even with the caller, you know, commenting what has happened in Atlanta, you know, I think, you know, one of the things that you have to be mindful of, even, you know, to say that if a business condones bad policing, that may be the business owner. That business owner may have employees. It may be a single mom. It may be, you know, you don't know the circumstances of people who work in those businesses and how they are impacted once that business has been destroyed. So, you know, I know we're not, you know, stating that, you know, people who condone bad policing, nothing should happen to them. But like you said, Keith, you know, when you start destroying private property or business, that impacts that community, that, you know, such as a local convenience store. You may have people who don't have transportation who walk to that convenience store for eggs or milk or, you know, something to drink or whatever it may be, because they don't have the resources to get to a bigger grocery store. So they utilize that small neighborhood store. But once the looters come in and destroy that store, now that impacts them. And so that's why there's so much conversation about all the looting that continues to happen. And Keith, you know, I have to say this before we go to break, is that everything that we have seen this year and last year, it has came at the expense of something that a police officer has done. Every incident that has happened across this country with looting, protesting, has been because a police officer shot and killed an unarmed black person or an unarmed black woman.
But Virgil, let me say this. It's not the one incident. It's the historical. And it's the ongoing. So let's make sure we talk about that. It's not the these are tipping points.
You're right.
These are communities that already have so it's being fed up. It's being tired of being tired and feel not respected. Now, I go back and say the looting is not right. But you have to understand when you see this, and just like this past weekend, 2 more incidents, and you see with, you know, I don't know what happened in the situation in Kenosha, but when you see someone, when the community sees someone shot in the back, there's no body cameras, and the people start to say, well, it's not what you think. That's where the frustration comes in.
Exactly.
I believe.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, hey, we're gonna take a quick break. You're listening to You and the Law on the Bachelor News Radio Network.
If you want real discussions on politics, social issues, racial issues, and other topics, then tune into the Bachelor News Radio Show. Listen live every Monday and Thursday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern at blogtalkradio.com. And if you missed the show, you can listen every Monday through Saturday at 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. Eastern, and every Sunday at 5 a.m. and 3 p.m. at thebatchelornews.airtime.pro. Listen and be informed.
Hey, we want to welcome you back to You and the Law on the Bachelor News Radio Network, where we are discussing some of the current events that have taken place across the country, that whether it's in Lafayette, Louisiana, or Kenosha, Wisconsin. There's definitely a lot going on across the country dealing with police. And we want to remind our listeners that the call-in number to the show is 646-929-0130. That's 646-929-0130. And also, if you don't get a chance to listen to the entire You and the Law show, you can listen to the rebroadcast of You and the Law show every day at 4 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at thebatchelornews.airtime.pro. That's thebatchelornews.airtime.pro to listen to the rebroadcast of You and the Law. If you can't listen to us to the show entirely, you can go back and listen to the rebroadcast shows at thebatchelornews.airtime.pro.
Well, Bird, I want to say something before we continue. I think we've always said that we don't condone bad behavior by police, from police officers. But we've also said that we've seen some positive things come up in law enforcement over the years. And one of the things I'd like to share, when you're talking over 60 years of law enforcement experience, you and I are at the point that if we don't think we can make a difference, then we could leave at any point. I mean, we could retire and do other things, but we still believe we can make a difference. We still believe in our profession. We're at a point, though, we will tell the truth. And if we mess up, if law enforcement makes a mistake, we're going to say that. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not going to prep. But I'm telling you, after 30 years of law enforcement, I have seen some come out of law enforcement, more positive than negative. But what I will tell you is, when we continue to see the incidents that we see, all the positives that we've done take a back seat because people still believe, and especially if you don't think that law enforcement is on the up and up and you think they're corrupt, when you see things like this, it doesn't change your mind. But however, I know as a police executive, I do know things are changing. I do know that I'm making changes. I do know that if it had not been for President Obama in 2015 with the 21st century policing, some of the changes that we have seen, the mental wellness for law enforcement officers, the technology, the community form, the oversight committees that are being formed by departments and things like that, that never would have happened. So there is positive in law enforcement, more positive than negative. It's just that you see more negative. We've seen all this stuff on TV, and those are the things that have gotten us, that takes us to the point where people don't believe in us.
Yeah. Well, and again, Keith, the frustration of in the black community and the frustration of people probably even listening to the show who feel like, they've seen nothing but a history of bad policing, and that they themselves don't see anything has changed in their communities. And that's why, we definitely encourage, our listeners. We're
not in a position, and Birds, I'm sorry to cut you out, and we're not in a position to try to change those individuals because we haven't lived in their shoes.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We've had experiences, and so we don't have the right to tell someone or diminish someone's belief, based on what they've examined. So we have to make sure that the listeners understand that too.
Yeah, and what they've experienced, because again, and that's why we definitely encourage our listeners to to definitely share your comments with us, whether it be on the show or on our Facebook page. And also just come on the air and have that conversation with us. What are you doing in your community, or what is going on in your city, across wherever you're listening to us from? What has happened in your city that you don't feel is going in the right direction to build a better relationship between the police and the black community? So, because again, Keith, with so many things that have happened, I think people often forget about other things that have occurred over the past year, and even me, Keith, just doing the research for the show, the Mrs. Jefferson, who was a black female, remember her? She was killed in Fort Worth, Texas back in October. So people forget the names of so many black men and black women who have been killed by police officers. And, again, here was almost similar to what happened with the young man in Dallas who was in his apartment. Police officer comes to his apartment, she comes in, she kills him. In Fort Worth, black female, she's in her home. Her neighbor calls because I believe one of the doors was open, so they were concerned. The officer was there to do a welfare check, and next thing you know, he ends up shooting and killing this young lady inside of her home. Even though he has been arrested and he's facing criminal charges, I think it just goes back to the mindset, Keith, that people are really just tired of hearing these types of incidents. And then when you see a citizen who has recorded something on their phone of a man walking away from police, unarmed, and being shot by police, but in the situation in Lafayette, this gentleman did have a knife. And even now you've got social media, people are just dissecting what took place in Wisconsin. Now they're coming out to say that this young man had a weapon, had a knife in his hand. No reports have come out that I've seen that have stated that this man was armed with any kind of a weapon. So, but you getting people who are trying to put their own narrative on what took place based on a still image of a picture.
Well, and Virgil, let's talk about. Let's remind the listeners. LA is, our producers monitoring phone calls, and please, if you call in and you have a question, just let him know, and we'd love to hear from you. That's how we make the show better, and we have the very open and candid conversations about the concerns that the community has with law enforcement. Also, there are more positives and negatives, but right now we're talking about the concerns that the communities of color have with law enforcement. And I'm going to say this. Virgil, let's go back to those incidents we talked about. We talked about the young lady in Fort Worth, and we talked about Breonna Taylor, and we talked about Bolton James. And let me say this. We still have to look at the fact of, I believe, and some people might disagree with me, that none of those officers got up that morning wanting to kill anyone. I truly believe, and if I ever found out that's false, it would break my heart, because I hope that we've gotten beyond that. I hope that's not the case. But at the same, but even though that's the case, what the community's seeing over and over again are white officers shooting African Americans, and so once that occurs multiple number of times, the reasoning part of or trying to explain that you believe that wasn't the officer's plan, that kind of goes out the door, and so that's difficult for a police community to understand, because that's beside the point. That's not what we don't care about. That we're caring about what we saw and what just happened, not what happened when that officer woke up this morning.
Well, and I think we have a question from one of our listeners that states that, what about how the police can gather information in a fatal shooting if with a black person if they don't share or give updates to the family of the victims? And, Keith, I think it's one of the things that has been frustrating with the family in Wisconsin is the fact that they have not been provided the updated information about their son or, the father of the kids. They have not been provided information, but when they go to get information, they're being told that they can't give them that information. So, it just goes back to you've got a law enforcement system who is not being open and transparent with the family. You've got a medical system who is not providing the necessary information to the family, and so the frustration continues to mount. Family is dealing with the possibility that they may lose, these kids may lose their father. And there were 3 children in the car who witnessed their father being shot by a police officer. And then you had other friends or family members who witnessed it as well. But it just goes back to why can't, Keith, why can't the law enforcement community get ahead of things instead of always being behind the curve when it comes to releasing information? There's always
we don't like change. We don't like change. Law enforcement never like change. It's always been keep your marbles hidden. Don't show everybody your marbles because it's going to affect the investigation, or that's going to provide the family more information for a lawsuit, or it might not get it's so many things that come out, that the reason we don't. But let me just share this with you, Virgil. We had a situation here in our city not too long ago, and I will say that our detectives do a really good job of staying in contact with those families. And one of the father or the grandfather didn't think that we were telling them everything. And so I sit down with them, and my investigative team sit down with them, and we went step by step. And they understood. Once you explain to someone, we can't give you this information right now because of this. We're frustrated because we can't give it to you. I understand that you're frustrated because you think we won't give it to you. But sometimes you just have to sit down with the family, listen to what their concerns are, let them yell, let them shout, let them get their frustrations out. They may never get their frustration out. But sometimes you have to just listen and see. And the response and the question might be as simply as, are you going to do a thorough investigation? Are you going to treat my loved one with dignity? Are you going to keep us updated, if not every day, once a week, once a month? What can we expect? You can answer those questions. A lot of the times, it will squash the disrespect and the lack of humanity that the family feels when their loved one. And I tell people all the time, it doesn't matter what that loved one was involved in. The fact of it is that's somebody's child, that's somebody's dad, sister, brother, cousin, friend. They want to just know that somebody cares. And so you have to talk to people, and you have to just be honest with people. I can't tell you, citizens are not going to buy anymore. Well, my attorney said don't talk. You can talk. There's things you can't talk about as regarding the investigation. But the quicker you reach and say something to the family, let them know who's going to be handling the investigation. Let them know how the investigation goes. let them know that it might take 6 to 12 weeks for the MEs. I think sometimes that in itself causes a little bit that causes that the community and that family to have a little bit more faith in that police department.
Yeah. Well, and Keith, it just goes back to what we saw with the Michael Brown incident in Ferguson, where his body laid there for hours and hours before he was even covered up with a sheet. Then the aftermath of it, the police, the chief never really communicated with the family. And it's almost the same situation here in Kenosha, where the police chief, nobody in official capacity has talked to the family. They're just hearing bits and pieces from different other sources, or maybe just from the news media. But Keith, before we wrap the show up here in a little bit, I think one of the things that law enforcement really needs to do is look at how maybe the private sector deals with things. I think when you bring in people from the private sector into law enforcement, maybe some type of victim advocate or somebody who is not the police in the police uniform, who can deal directly with the family and share information with the family, because oftentimes, and people may, oftentimes, Keith, police officers are not sensitive, and that's a concern, because it's almost like, are you not a human? Because you have a wife, you have a mother, you have a father, you have kids, but here's a family that you're looking at, and you're looking at them as if their lives doesn't mean anything. And so you have this wall built up that I'm not going to tell you anything. And, and so that's, again, goes back to, you're not taking the opportunity to build, even in the worstest situation, Keith, you're not taking the opportunity to reach the family. Even if the officer, the officer is wrong, but you still have to reach the family. And we don't really see a lot of police departments doing a good job of doing that.
You're absolutely right, man. That situation here, right when I got here, we had an officer-involved shooting, and the union chastised the mayor for reaching out to the family of the young man that we shot. I mean, they chastised him. And basically, the mayor's a minister, and he prayed with the family, and he was chastised for that. I was chastised for talking to the family. I'm still being chastised because I have a relationship with that family, and it's based on the fact that I've built that since I've been here, just listening. And so there are those times when police chiefs and mayors and things, city managers are chastised just because they want to see how the family's doing. They haven't said the officer did anything wrong. They haven't said he didn't do anything wrong. But the fact is, it's the human side of it. It's the reverse of dehumanization, and we've got to stop that. That doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be found at fault in a lawsuit. All you're doing is reaching out, saying, "I'm thinking about you." That's all you're doing. And a lot of times, people, the leaders of an organization, are chastised for that because people get in their feelings. The union gets in their feelings or things like that. So I just wanted to put that out there also.
Yeah. And Keith, we want to remind our listeners that, over the next several weeks, we're going to have a series of these topics that we're going to be talking about, the relationship between the law enforcement community and the police and what their rights are. So this is just part 2 of a series of shows that we're going to talk about directly with things that are occurring in the law enforcement across the country. And so, but we want to remind each and everyone who's listening to the show, we definitely thank you for listening to us, but we also want you to be mindful that you can go back and listen to rebroadcast shows of You and the Law at thebatchelornews.airtime.pro, thebatchelornews.airtime.pro. You can catch the rebroadcast shows every day from 4 a.m. and 6 p.m. If you're on Central Time, that would be 3 a.m. and 5 p.m. on Central Standard Time, or wherever you're listening to us across the country. Just check your local listings to listen to You and the Law on the Bachelor News Radio Network. But Keith, a great show, and I'm pretty sure next week we're going to be talking about some things that have occurred just since today's show. So it's just unfortunate times that we're dealing with in law enforcement with the pandemic. We're dealing with a presidential election. It's just some challenging times, and I think we definitely need some leadership across the country to step up and to bring people together. That's what it's going to take to change how citizens feel about their local police, how they feel about their local politicians, and even on a national level, feeling about this presidential election that we have coming up.
Yeah, and I just want to say real quick, thank you to the listeners. You're making this possible. Keep the questions coming. Keep listening. Listen to the rebroadcast. Take notes and stuff. But we just want to say good night. God bless you, and we'll see you next week on You and the Law
on the Bachelor News Radio Network. Thank you.